Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you. If you're a first-time listener, glad you found us. Welcome to the conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, and also don't forget to give us a good rating. Now, I'm not bashful. I will beg. I do have a caller on, so I'll call myself a well-dressed beggar. So if you like what you're listening to, please do give us the highest ratings. It helps us in the stores. I also want to thank those who are return listeners around the globe. We've got listeners in 32 countries, 6 continents. And if I could figure out where the science stations are or how to market to penguins, we'd have people in Antarctica too. So, or listeners, I guess you could say. Okay, so a little bit of house cleaning before we get to today's guest. You know, the show is all about great people, interesting stories, interesting subjects. Around every corner is another discovery, and I have too many interests for just one lifetime. But don't forget to go to the show website, okay? The reason why I send you to go there is because we have bios and information on all of our guests. And it's really important because we're going to talk about so many things today that you'll probably want to go back and learn some more. So I want you to come and check out the website. So it's the rexandrewshow.com. And then if you don't like the platform you're on, you can always find another one where everywhere that podcasts can be found. They're on 23 different distribution points on YouTube and then the social media platforms. Okay, so great guest today. I'm excited. You know, I love to do interviews because I'm just outside of Boulder here in Colorado. And whenever I do interviews with my friends down under, I'm actually doing Back to the Future because it's tomorrow. You know, it's always tomorrow wherever they are. So we're reaching into the future and we're going back to the future this afternoon. I've got a great guest today. He's a sales strategist, and he helps people optimize their sales techniques and processes. Now, it's not just optimizing the content, it's actually optimizing the ability to optimize their sales presentations and calls and stuff like that. And it's an art. And I will apologize up front, you know what, because this is just me. I think life is sales. That's what my entire career has been in. I don't care what we're doing in life. We have to sell, okay? If you want to get married, you better be able to sell, right? If you want to buy that house at the best negotiated price, you got to be able to sell. So whenever we are taking a stance for ourselves or promoting, we're always in sales. So I'd like to welcome to the show today, James Briscall. James, how are you?
I'm doing extremely well. Thank you, Rex. And how are you today, sir?
Doing good. It's been a fun afternoon, and spring's here in the Rockies, so things are starting to warm up and the trees are starting to blossom, so it's a good time to be knocking things around. Okay, so our audience knows how this plays out. The show is always about the human stories of successful people and how they get there. I have always been a huge consumer of biographies, and so today we're going to give a little mini biography on James. So James, if you could, we're going to have you, if you could, real quick. Some people like to play along. And so could you give a website or a social media site that people can connect with you, and then we'll circle back and start telling your story? So
Sure. Well, hi there, Rex. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And yeah, the place that they can go and check me out is on LinkedIn, James Briscall, solution strategist. And yeah,
okay,
off
fantastic.
they go.
All right. So what we'd like to do is go back to the beginning because we are all accumulation of who we are today. You know, life is like crossing a creek or a stream. You hop from one rock to another and you hope to get to the other side. Sometimes you have to take side hops and sometimes you fall off and you get your feet wet. But what I'd like to do, if we could, James, is go back to the beginning, okay? Help us understand, you know, where were you born? Where were you raised? Siblings, you know, did you have siblings that survived your harassment? What your parents did for a living, what your home life was like. And then, you know, don't forget, I'll remind you these questions. It's a long list. But what did you do growing up? I mean, in your spare time, you know, whether it's sports or music or theater or shoplifting, we don't care what it was. We want to know some of those influences. And then we're going to hopscotch up to where you are today and the things you focus on, because that's where you're having great success. So take it away, James. Will you tell us where you were born and where did this all start?
Yes, I was born and bred in the southeast of England, in the county of Kent, near the beautiful small city of Canterbury. Very, very famous cathedral there, Canterbury Cathedral. And could be considered, I guess, the centre of Christianity in Britain. There was York Minster, but Canterbury Cathedral and the Archbishop of Canterbury is certainly very, very significant. So yeah, a lovely city, some lovely old architecture, the River Stour. Yeah, I
Okay.
was blessed.
Okay. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a sister, slightly younger, and she's still over there.
Okay. Still Canterbury.
Yeah. Well, in the area, there's an area of rolling hills and pastures and small woods and whatnot.
Okay.
About half an hour's drive outside. So yeah,
Okay.
she and my parents are also in that area, in that area too.
Okay, so still in the UK. So what did your parents do when you were growing up? What type of occupations, or what roles did they play in your life?
Yeah, so my mum is still a veterinary surgeon. So
Oh, wow.
She is one of these really lucky people who knew what she wanted to do from an early age and has continued to do that for over 50 years now.
Wow.
So that's pretty amazing. And my dad was a company director. So yeah.
A company director
which is awesome. And he was with the company for a long time. And yeah. So.
Okay. So what was your home life like? Were you a pretty connected family? Were things kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say dysfunctional, but, were you close? What was your home life like growing up?
Yeah, it was great. It was like we lived in we moved house a couple of times, but it was always in a rural area or close to a rural area. And my dad was for the majority of time was always the head cook and the gardener and loved we've always had dogs, and my mum had had horses. So yeah, we always did things, and family meals were important, and spending weekends with the grandparents, and
Nice.
So a very together family. And,
okay. Now, quick question for you then.
Sure.
What else did you do with your spare time? I mean, if you were living in rural, you probably had some animals and things like that, and a little bit of adventure.
Yeah.
But did you play sports, the theater, or stuff like that?
I did. So one of my interests, which I got from my mum, was horse riding. So I would compete in local equine events, and then at school up to about the age of 12 or 13, probably 12, I did like team sports. I was useless with the hand-eye for cricket and whatnot, but I enjoyed rugby, and then from about the age of 12 to 15, I used to row, and was quite successful. And then I guess the other thing was I love to explore the countryside, either walking the dogs or riding my bike around the country lanes. So yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So did you compete pretty heavily with crew then?
With the rowing, yeah. It was. If anyone who has rowed competitively, it's desperately hard training.
Yes.
and yeah, we used to compete most weekends during the term time, and I suppose I definitely never competed at a national level, but there were boys in the school who used to train.
Yeah, I have a nephew who actually was a very good high school golfer, but then when he went, and he lived down in Texas, and when he went off to the University of Texas A&M, somebody introduced him to the rowing team, and that was pretty much, he set the golf aside, he became a rower. So he actually competed collegiately on the crew teams down there. So great experience for him. Okay.
It's a great sport because it's a physical sport, but there's also a lot of balance. And when you have it really good, be it in a quad, which is 4 or an 8, there's a real sense of glide.
Yep.
And I guess the analogy going forward in so many years or decades is there's a lot of talk about flow in our lives, and really it was the taking the action, which was sort of getting the oar in the water and the kick, and then the flow after that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
definitely developing a cadence, being able to take advantage of momentum. I mean, there's a lot to rowing. There really is. And I've never rowed really. I mean, other than on a machine in the gym. So,
which is still pretty brutal.
Yeah, still pretty brutal. You're not going to do that forever. So help me understand. How did you get down under to New Zealand? Let's explore this part of the story.
Yeah, do you want me to go through any times from being a teenager to when I?
Yeah, we'll hop back to that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've been here about 15 years now.
Okay.
I probably came over at I don't know, 33 or something, 32. But yeah, quite a bit happened in between sort of leaving school and when I came over. So happy to fill in that as well.
Yeah,
Adrian.
let's go back. So you finished up, primary school, high school, those types of things.
Yeah.
What was your next hop? We will come back
Yeah.
to your migration here.
Yeah, so I was really keen on music, and it was classical music. I played in orchestras and whatnot. And then at 15, I discovered rock music, and someone played me a Frank Zappa album, and it kind of twisted my head around. He's such an interesting guy.
Frank, you know what, James? I think you might be the first person. I'm a huge music fan. I don't have any skills, don't play any instruments, but I think you might be the first person I've ever talked to that says that Frank Zappa was an influence. That's great.
I think with Frank, because he obviously straddled classical and rock and so many other styles, but it was also he basically insulted anyone and everyone, and
Yeah.
it wasn't because he hated things. It was just the fact that he believed in freedom, and it was through often a comedic way.
Yeah.
And he was self-depreciating too, and I think that is so important to so I really respected him.
That's funny.
Yeah,
The one thing about I've always heard people talk about Frank Zappa is that he was an equal opportunity offender. I mean, he would offend anybody. I mean,
yeah. Anyway, yeah. So
I like that because I'm kind of that way myself. If you don't like it, too bad, right?
well, exactly. Yeah. So I got into music. I fell off the classical wagon a bit, and we started a rock band playing Sex Pistols and Black Sabbath and all that wholesome kind of teenage rock stuff. And so I left school. I wanted to be a musician, but I was encouraged to go to university. And so my other passion, as I said, was the countryside and conservation. So I went and studied that and London University. But then I basically spent most of my time playing in bands and playing in local pubs and clubs and all kinds of styles of music. And after university, I played the guitar, and a good mate of mine in the band, he played the bass. So and I don't know, you probably know this, Rex, but the Rolling Stones, when they first did their first tour of the States, was it in 64 or 67 or something?
Yeah, right.
They actually talked about being able to go and actively hunting down the Muddy Waters and the Howling Wolves, which they'd listened to on their vinyl, right? So myself and my good friend Rob, we basically did the same thing. We actually wanted to go and see where all this amazing music that had influenced our teenage years came from. So I thought that I was Eric Clapton. He thought that he was Jack Bruce. So we grabbed our guitars, basically just left England with the clothes on our back, and bought a pass and travelled on the Greyhound coach for 3 months. And man, that was such an experience. It was amazing.
Just bebopping all over the U.S., huh?
Yeah, but basically to all the classic areas. The highlights were Austin, Texas. I was a great blues fan.
Oh yeah.
We went through Mississippi and Louisiana, went to a few juke joints, went to New Orleans and played along Bourbon Street, and got the opportunity to stay in a shotgun shack, just with all the balcony, not shack, a shotgun apartment, as they call it, the 3 rooms where you could shoot all the way through. And went to San Francisco and a lot of other places. It was really, and it wasn't just that we were playing, and Chicago, obviously, with Buddy Guy, and went to BB King's Club, and it was the opportunity to talk to the people on the Greyhound, Rex, and I found that the people who travelled on the Greyhound were either musicians or connected with music, and there was a lot of African Americans, and so we just had these amazing conversations. Like I could remember once, and I sat down next to this older gentleman, and he was dressed to the nines with a suit and whatnot, and I probably sat next to him for 6 or 8 or 12 hours, wherever it was. And he used to tell me that he saw Miles and Davis and Muddy Waters in clubs, and for me being, I don't know, I was 22 or something. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a more precious 4 to 6 hours or 6 to 8 hours.
Wow, that's great. You know, there's a documentary you have to look up. I believe it's on YouTube. It might be on Netflix, but I think it's on YouTube. But it's on ZZ Top.
Oh,
So when they were coming up, they were a Southern blues band. When they
yeah,
and that dipped into rock, and so it's a lot of it is Dusty Rhodes talking, and it's an incredible thing because most people don't realize that they played. That blues was a huge influence. I mean, they played in the South all the time, and all the clubs in New Orleans and those types of places. I mean, the southern part of the United States, there's an amazing culture because you get the mix of the Austin, you get the mix of the blues and New Orleans, Nashville. I
yeah,
mean, it's a whole culture down there. So yeah, you'll have to check out that. And I'm
yeah.
sorry I don't have it up in my tongue, but and it's funny. I was sitting here listening to you when you're talking about the Greyhound. The first thing that always comes to my mind because I took a couple Greyhound trips, not very many. It was just a hop over when I was a poor college kid,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there was a comedian, and I don't remember who said it. I'm terrible, but he always said, I think it was Louis. What was his last name? Anyway, he said that traveling by bus was, just being who's who in mental health because there's
Mm.
all kinds of people there that might talk your ear off for a couple hours type of stuff that you didn't really want to know
Absolutely.
the story, right? So who's
No,
who in
no.
mental health?
Yeah. And I know that I can remember BB King. I saw a documentary about him, and he said that he would just sit and watch the world go by, like just sit, because he obviously toured on buses for 60 or 70 years, right?
Yeah.
And I see, and I've seen several of those greats. I mean, I've seen them perform. I've been blessed with those opportunities, but I've seen these little documentaries about them, and they all talk about their time on the
On the
road.
bus. Yeah.
Absolutely, and it really was a special. It was a special trip, and yeah, yeah.
So how long
And
did you guys bebop around on the bus?
it was for 3 months,
3 months.
and
Wow.
yeah, and then the pass came to an end, and then I came back, and funnily enough, I sort of turned my back on music shortly after that, and kind of life came along, and I suppose I was used to doing 4 to 6 hours playing a day, so I got to a reasonable standard, and then I had to go out and find a job, and that leads me on to my next stage.
Well, I had to interject something because I was listening to you talking about your travels.
Yeah, yeah.
Now being an American, and I'm 55. Okay, so my opposite trip would have been to England and hike and have been around where Def Leppard was because
Right,
that
yeah,
I'm always been a huge Def Leppard fan. If I were to take the top performers on my playlist, it would be between Kid Rock and Def Leppard. So my 3-month tour would have been take me to England and let me see where the boys came from. So.
well, I mean, just to speak to that, Rex, it's very interesting because I think I'm right in saying that Def Leppard came from Northern England, maybe around Sheffield or
Yeah,
somewhere.
Sheffield. Yep.
And a lot of the greatest bands came from that band, that what people might used to call the working class or the working man's.
Yeah.
It was where the mines were, and before the mines there was all the cotton, the cotton and the cloth mills, the textile mills, and then the mines, and men were men. And although that started, the industries there started to go into decline from the mid 80s. It still molded a lot of people and there's society there. And Def Leppard, I mean, and before then, I think obviously there's a famous one from another era, Black Sabbath. They were all
Black
from
Sabbath.
Birmingham, I think.
Yep.
About industrial city. So
Yeah. Well,
I think Robert
you've
Page
got Woody Page. You've got isn't Moody Blues from that area too?
They might well be. Obviously, the most famous band was the Beatles from
Yeah,
Liverpool.
of course, Liverpool.
So yeah, and almost an equivalent area to the south of the state, sort of a little bit lower income and working and closer to the just more of a blue collar, and that seems to be whichever era it cultivates this very richness which goes into the music and the songwriting.
Well, it's interesting you say that, and then we'll pivot here. When I was watching that ZZ Top documentary, those when you're a musician, you're not making any money. You're living on free food and where can you get to a buffet and
exactly.
Crashing on people's couches and there's 10 people at the house that night and kind of stuff. So there is an element of that struggle that fosters that creativity. You know, it
Yeah.
just does. And you would, whether it's the working class, you know, because I think everybody in Def Leppard were all factory worker kids. You know, they were really rough areas that they came out of. I mean, no jobs and that kinds of stuff.
No.
And so when they told their parents they were going to go be musicians, their parents were like, "Are you crazy? You can't even get a real job, right?" So,
yeah.
So anyway, well, let's pivot a little bit then. So you went back to England, okay?
Yeah.
And after your 3-month, you know, basically Chantagua ramble through the States, okay?
Yeah,
what was the next step?
Yeah, so then I followed my passion for conservation. But I also wanted to travel. So I worked part time. Well, I had my own gardening and landscaping business where I'd work. I do sort of 8 or 9 months a year, and then travel for 3. And that kind of leads me to my first big trip abroad was to Southeast Asia, Thailand, Vietnam, when it was just opening up in the mid-90s.
Okay.
And, Cambodia, and really amazing, really humbling experiences. And I was in the Angkor Wat complex, just astounding. And I was at the town there, Siem Reap, and I got dreadful food poisoning. I got really, really badly ill.
Oh my goodness.
And about a month later, I started to feel quite ill. I was still ill, so I came back to England, and then I came down with a autoimmune arthritis, and that was another chapter which has which has influenced my life to this day. So.
Okay, so are you still dealing with your autoimmune deficiencies today?
Well, the funny thing is, it gave me some dreadful times, some very, very painful times, and I was dependent on sort of pharmaceutical drugs and whatnot. But I always hated that. Like I knew there was probably a better way. And then 10 years ago, I was introduced to Chinese medicine, and then and although it wasn't instantaneous, I've now recovered to the extent that I'm passionate outdoor pursuits, skier and runner, mountain biker and swimmer, and so yeah. I mean, I have to wash it. I have to be careful, but for all intents and purposes, it shaped me to what I became, but it's no longer a hindrance within my.
Yeah, I know autoimmune deficiencies vary for different people and how it works, and I have a friend that has it, and you know, it can be debilitating. It can be not. So it varies all over the place. Okay. So what was next?
Yeah. and then another interesting adventure was I then went and rode across Mongolia.
Oh, really?
I went and explored Mongolia. I think it was for a total 4 or 5 months over a couple of years. And that was just amazing. That was the late 90s. And it was a contact from my mum's who had been on riding holiday, and I went over there, and the urban Ulaanbaatar, the capital city, the people who lived there were very close to their rural cousins and grandmothers and aunts, and so it was quite easy to be able to get out there, because they'd be more than happy for you to come along in their Jeep when they went out and visited Aunt Flo, and contribute to the cost. So what I do is, and I also traveled around the second time with my sister too, which was another special time. And we would go out to a rural area, and there'd be people there, and they in turn hadn't seen their mate over a couple of mountain ranges or sort of up another valley. So it'd be, hey, can we hire you and a couple of horses, and can you take us on a jaunt for a week or 2 over the mountains and through the forests, and then every day they'd be stopping off and speaking to their neighbors or their friends and family, and it was an astonishing time that they are still very, very close to the land.
Wow. So was there, you mentioned real quick that there was a connection through your mom. Was there a pivot point that just made you say, okay, I've got to go to Mongolia? Because I mean, you know, you hear people talk about Nepal all the time, or I'm going to go to China and see the Great World, but the Great Wall, or I'm going to go to Vietnam because I want to check out, you know,
that's it.
a country rebuilt.
Yeah,
So what was the key decision maker for Mongolia other than the connection?
Well, what it was my mum had found out, seen an advert in a horse magazine. This lady was organising a trip there, and now that I've explained it, she'd basically done the same thing, and just wanted to take a group of people to share the costs. And Mum told me about it, and I actually went over there with her for the first couple of weeks. So I got the lie of the land, and then the group went back, and then I continued with their contacts for the first. I think I was over there for 2 or 3 months the first time, and then when I went with my sister, we had a couple contacts, and then we went around there a second time. And we walked over mountain range into Kyrgyzstan, and then went into Uzbekistan, and yeah, so that was how the whole journey unfolded there, Rex.
Well, I'm a little bit of a vagabond myself, and travel through South America. So interesting, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get back from Mongolia.
Yes, sir.
Did you start working on a career at this point in time, or are you digging up more adventures to just go bebopping around the world, huh?
No. So this is where I became more serious, and myself and my then wife, we started a conservation consultancy. So at the time, landowners could apply for grants, which really to increase the biodiversity value of their land, but there's a payment within that to help for facilitation. So that was fantastic because by my personality, I'm quite strategic. So it was really a matter of speaking to these people and then gaining evidence that there was a worthwhile in doing some woodland conservation or hedgerow conservation. So it was a passion which I went back into, and the other lesson learned was supply and demand. So I found out that there weren't really any people who were able to do that old style woodland and hedgerow conservation. So I actually learned those practical skills as well. And so that was a way forward, and that led to moving over to New Zealand.
Wow. That's quite the hop, from England down to New Zealand then.
Yeah. There was, we at the time, it was for, I guess, why people do leave their home country for a better life, for
Sure.
They think maybe the fewer people, a higher quality of life. I sort of got fed up of hiking in the rain in the British National Parks. So.
Well, now you don't even just have hiking in that sentence. It's just being in the rain at all, right? I mean, I can remember the company I used to work for, our European headquarters was in London, and so I'd go over there, and you'd ask people for an ice water, and they would look at you like, "What's wrong with you? Why do you want ice water?" Well, when you go there and you start to realize it's cold a lot and it rains a lot, so these bloody waitresses would bring out an ice water with 1 cube in it, and you'd be like, okay, like they were stretching to get that 1 cube to you. But I'm sorry, that's all we got. We got 1 cube we can give you. So, but when you start to realize how wonderful the rain is there, I can see that. So you had to escape the rain a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually ended up in a tiny settlement south of Queenstown, where one of my then wife's friends was. She left due to another story a couple of months beforehand, unexpectedly. So we ended up in this small rural community, no contacts, and had to start. And our daughter was born when we were there as well. And so I lived the rural dream or what I thought was the rural dream, for about 18 months, worked on a lot of remote farm stations. I did some beekeeping. I did some, New Zealand loves using helicopters, choppers for everything. So there's heli skiing, there's heli biking, there's heli fishing, and there's even the pine trees are a big problem here because they're introduced. So there's heli pine control. So there was one job where we'd be flown up to the top of the mountain with our chainsaws and all the gear, and we'd cut trees all day long, and then we chop it down. So I did all of those jobs for about 18 months. So at the end of it, we just realised that our future wasn't there, and we wanted to move to a slightly more kind of closer to an urban area. But yeah, I lived the rural dream there for 18 months.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I bet there aren't a whole lot of people been jumping out of a helicopter with a chainsaw with them.
Just
You know,
yeah.
I mean, hella skiing, hella biking, I get all that kind of stuff, but hella jump out of a with a chainsaw. Well, at least it probably wasn't running at the time, so I'll give you that.
No. And and then really, so I did some landscaping for a while over near Queenstown, and then we decided to build a straw bale house, and it was new for the council regulations. I didn't know anything about it, had to a lot of research, and that really got me back into the consultancy way of thinking, because I had to facilitate. I worked with an architect, a draftsperson, and we worked on the design and facilitated just how to get a straw bale earth plaster house through a lot of regulations. So that sort of got me back into that way of thinking, that strategic problem solving way. Yeah.
Now, is that where you made the pivot to get into sales? I mean, man, you've done a lot of different things.
Yeah, and the pivot came just to I did that for 4 or 5 years, and then unfortunately my whole life fell apart. And this is the crux. And this really, like, all these things I've talked about have brought me to where I am today. And you know, Rex, how a lot of people, and we all have it really, there comes a point where everything just falls apart, and it's a real big crossroads, right? And a lot of business people speak about it, a lot of entrepreneurs, and it's at those moments. And I've also studied the hero's journey, and it's embedded within that. And it's at those moments, isn't it, where you either recoil, and maybe you become a victim, which I certainly was for a few months, or you actually learn a way of how to step out of it and gain the insights, and even become empowered through going through that process, that experience.
Well, I've as a consumer of biographies, you know, everybody thinks that someone who's been successful, well, it's a common thought that success just falls out of the sky and lands on people. No, success in most cases is the result of lives falling apart, extreme struggles, health changes. I mean, there's all kinds of pivot points or things that, in many cases, force you to do those changes. But out of those failures come some of the greatest accomplishments. I mean, I mentioned this one, and then we can dive into a little more of your details.
Sure.
You know, Hershey's chocolate is the most productive and most successful candy company in the world. But most people don't realize that Milton Hershey, the founder, filed bankruptcy in the candy business 7 times. 7 times. And then the 8th time he made it. Well, now he's got a town named after him. He's, you know, world recognized as one of the top 5 brands in the whole world. You know, everybody in the world knows what a Hershey's chocolate bar is, right?
Yeah.
So, so you went through a similar type of thing where things just fell apart, right? The wheels came off the cart.
Absolutely. And a very dark hole I found myself in, and I was no longer able to do the physical work, which I really loved. And I was a single dad, and my health. And then that was a real pivot point, and a friend introduced me, and very, very kind, and I'm very grateful to her to this day. She introduced me to coaching. She learned a process called the fundamental human needs. And I wish I'd done a bit of research, because it was actually put together by a Chilean economist, I believe, in the 50s, whose name escapes me. But she took me through that, and it was the realization, Rex, that we can create our own future. And that was the turning point. That was my turning point. Like, it isn't what life gives us, it's what we create. And how do we go about creating it? And is it only us, or is there a bigger picture? Is it about my health or my wealth, or is it about giving out to others? And as you know, part of regaining health or fitness or relationships or wealth comes from the giving to others, and that was really a very pivotal point in my life.
Okay. Wow. So how long did it take you to turn things around from when things fell apart?
Yeah, probably 6 or 8 months, and then my next big step was that I found myself a mentor. So I found myself a mentor in Eben Pagan, a fantastic
Yep.
online
Online
marketer,
marketer.
coach as well,
The early days of
copywriter.
online marketing. Evan Pagan. Yep. Frank
Yeah,
Kearns. Yep.
And so I invested in his very one of his high ticket programs. I also invested in his coaching program, and there it was almost like from my first, I don't know, let's say my first 38, 40 years. It was like that classic, and you and I have heard this so many times. It was like you go through school and you're taught what the education system thinks that you need to know, and then maybe my school would have probably have ideally have liked me to be an accountant or doctor or medic or lawyer or and then I never fitted in there, which is why I've done all these amazingly variety things since. But it was almost like in finding out how to connect to people through words, which is copywriting, understanding, learning a little bit about human behavior, human psychology, patterns, mental models. It was kind of, wow. That's a whole new, that's a, like my education starts now. Yeah.
Okay. So the work that you're doing currently, when
Yes.
we talked now about being a strategist and optimization, let's talk about that for a little bit.
Great. So I ended up coaching people, but I then was no good at sales, so I found myself a sales mentor. I then immersed myself in sales. So this leads us up to where I am now. I'm passionate about sales because I'm passionate about coaching, but for me, sales is about being able to support someone, be it B2C or B2B. It's about being able to support someone within a relatively short space of time, 45 minutes or 60 minutes, maybe a couple of calls, but to support them in making that, in them stepping up for that transformation, either within their life or their business. So for me, it's almost like supercharging coaching, and it's being able to pull the knowledge of coaching and human behavior, mental models and patterns and psychology all into being on top of your game for the 45 to 60 minutes. And that's why I'm passionate about it. And that's where the strategist comes in.
So how do you do that today? If someone comes to you and says, hey, you know what, James, I need some help. How do you execute on the strategy and the coaching and, optimization? So what's that delivery model look like for you today?
So a typical example might be that someone comes to me and they say, hey James, like I would like an extra salesperson, or I'm not getting the conversions. Maybe I need a better script, but what often happens, Rex, is I call it the client's journey. It's from the lead acquisition up to the point of a sale. And if that client's journey, and I delve into this time and time again, who is your perfect client? Your marketing avatar, and if that isn't clear at point one, then it's sort of an accumulation of lemons. And so at the point, and so when the sales call comes, you either get a high no-show rate, or you get similar objections, or you basically have to go through your whole system, or there's all kinds of things. And that to me is the icing on the cake. But with the background in coaching and marketing, then I can go back and actually look at the ingredients in the cake itself. Is it the right content? Do you know who your avatar is? Do you know who the pain point of the avatar is? Do you know their journey, where they want to go, their challenges and their roadblocks? So a lot of people look at maybe sales and marketing as separately, but it's what I hear and experience on the sales calls or listening to people about their sales problems, that I then take it back to the client acquisition and the beginning of the client's journey.
Okay. So do you do this mostly in person now? Are you doing this hybrid models with, online delivery like we're doing today with Zoom, or what's your methodology to work with a client now?
Yeah. So there is two ways. One way is for direct training and coaching, which is one-to-one over Zoom, and as I said, we can go through all that I've just explained there. Or the other way is that they're the business owners who have created success within their own businesses, and they have then launched a program, and they're then finding that they can't do every aspect of that plus run their own business.
Mm-hmm.
So they might want someone to take care of the sales. And I love doing sales calls, the strategy calls as well, because it's the human connection. So you could say that I work one-on-one on the back end, but I also love working on the front end too. And so those business owners can then really do the delivery of their program and really change the people's lives. And
okay.
For me, it's a lovely combination.
How did COVID impact your business?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, actually, Rex. It was a bit of a tricky year, and the reason being is that business owners were pivoting and they were trying new things, and it also coincided with how can I put this? Facebook accounts having a lot of issues, Facebook business accounts.
Yes.
And so it was a difficult year for everyone, and those in sales were not immune. And obviously, if someone's trying a new idea and they've got traction, but then the traction maybe eases off, or their account is closed down.
Yep.
The secret to sales, as you know, is building a connection, and that often comes from continuity rather than being with one offer for a relatively short time or like a couple of months. But the magic comes when
after
you can
consistency.
Really connect.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my other business besides yapping on a mic is I've been in online marketing for like 20 years. That's why I would know who an Evan Pagan was. And this last year and a half has been horrible with all the social media platforms because they have amped up the sensitivity. And so getting your business accounts shut down has just been, it's an expected behavior. And it's been an interesting year over 20, just because, boy, even the slightest little variation and they would shut down your accounts with no explanation, of course. I mean,
exactly.
You might as well try to call God and get an answer, on the phone, because that's about how working with them. I mean, and it was horrific with both Facebook, and then our good friends over at YouTube, and then our good friends at Parler got shut down. I mean, it was an interesting last year.
It is, and no one's immune to it.
No.
And if a business owner's account gets shut down, the ripples and the repercussions go all the way to the sales team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, but I guess swinging the boat around a little bit, that actually comes back to another passion of mine, which is the hero's journey, and we can really look at 2020 as and still ongoing now, but as a set of challenges which are there for us to navigate through, to gain the insights and being able to really step up. I believe step up into being better versions of ourselves, being able to give more and support more.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been an interesting year, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the tech companies. All the big social media companies of a big consequence, except for TikTok, based in the U.S. and all the political things that are going on. I still think we're going to have an interesting 21. It won't be as bad as 20, but I think it's going to be 21 because, I have a big mouth. Let's just put that the way it is, and I tend to, this is my opinion. Everybody's entitled to my opinion, whether you want it or not, and so I tend to share my opinion, and just the other day I got shut down on Facebook because I made a 4-sentence question. Our governor here in Colorado was sharing the fact that 2 million residents had been, vaccine, had the vaccine.
Sure.
And I literally put on there, is this 2 million lab rats? Question mark. And that was enough to get me thrown in Facebook jail. Well, then, of course, being the crusty old guy that I am, I challenged it. And they came back and said, you didn't. And so I thought, but that's about as bad as it's been on business accounts with Facebook and YouTube. It's just been horrible.
Yeah.
It's been horrible.
Yeah. I mean, I think not to delve into that, but I think it's so important for people to try to step above the parapet if they can, and at least get a view and get their own view rather than hiding beneath the parapet and getting everyone else's view.
Yep.
And again, I mean, it'll be the make of some people and the break of some people, and there's no judgment either way. But yeah, very, very testing times.
So what's next on the horizon for you, James?
Yeah, I'm just super excited because I've also recently started a new project working with a software company with AI tools to support multinationals, multinational companies and global companies and national companies with optimizing their enterprise and marketing campaigns. So that is fantastic, because that's also supporting the market at a higher level than maybe the smaller business owner. And that's like really exciting too, because it's actually dealing with the inefficiencies of paid ads, of Google ads, of redundant clicks, and coming back to the marketing element. It was something that Professor Steve Edelis worked out with eBay 7 or 8 years ago, and it's sort of hidden about people unnecessarily clicking. And again, anything which can help streamline those processes, Rex. So then they can really begin to broaden their marketing horizons and relocate that to save money onto other platforms. So that to me is a really exciting project, and it's so yin and yang to the one-to-one coaching and the sales that it really interests me. It's sort of like yourself, I've broad interests, and anything which enables me to learn and serve some more is always a great project.
So I always give this last question to people. I mean, you've been very generous in explaining and sharing your life, your journey, your Greyhound bus rides, Mongolia, the great stuff here. We all have this concept called a bucket list, and I didn't get this from Trav Albert down there in Australia. He is the bucket list guy. He's known quite a bit down under, well, actually worldwide. But everybody's got a bucket list. But as a scientist, you know that there's an opposite to everything in the world. So this list is an opposite of a bucket. Okay, it rhymes with bucket, starts with an F. Okay, but I'm not going to say that. So it's the F-it list. Okay, so.
Right.
So while you're thinking here for a second, because this question throws some people. Now, 2 things that would be on my F-it list are, well, maybe we can add some other one. I'm not going to eat any more sardines. Okay, I did that one time. All right, I'm not going to eat any more sardines. Okay, that's just not me. All right, I'm not going back to Mexico City. I had guns stuck in my ribs going into a business meeting. I don't think that's very funny. And the other one thing is, I'm not going to handle a tarantula, big, huge, tarantula types like things. I've had those rain down on me when I was in the Amazon. So what might be on James Briscall's bucket F-it list? Okay, not the bucket list, but the opposite.
One of it is I'm never gonna push myself into ill health. It's like forgiving myself for doing what I can't humanly do.
Sure.
So the effort list, the number one is just accepting what I can do, and never again going down that road of
At
having
hell.
to feel that I have to be a superhero in every aspect of my life all the time.
That's very good. Well, thanks for coming on. It's been great. It's been great to have somebody, we get to do the Back to the Future here with Down
That's
Under.
it.
You've been a great guest. You're doing some great things with your coaching. So if you could, one last time, if you could let people know how to get a hold of you online then.
Sure. Connect with me via my LinkedIn profile, James Briscall, Solution Strategist. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to offer your listeners an opportunity here, Rex.
Okay.
So if they're having similar problems to yourself of cracking a hard market and marketing to penguins down in Antarctica.
Yeah, we got to figure that one out, James. I mean, I've been thinking I might even have to provide them with the smartphones. I'm not sure.
So if they message me and mention the Rex Andrew show and they say, hey James, like I'm getting these objections, I can't crack a market, it's as hard as selling fish to penguins down in Antarctica, then I will give them 20 minutes pro bono, which would be worth like $20,000, and they can up and run with it, or maybe they would like to invest some more time. But there we go, 20 minutes pro bono with the Rex Andrew Show.
Fantastic. Thanks, James. It's been great.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Okay, until next time, folks, we'll call this one a wrap for this episode. Please don't forget to stop by the show website. We'll have all of James' information there when this gets published, and I'm excited to have him on the show. We'll follow back up. So rexandrewshow.com. And until next time, the three things we always say to people: be safe, be bold, and make it a great day.